Hello, welcome to the Thinking the Unthinkable podcast, our latest leadership conversation. Hello, I'm Nik Gowing. Here at Thinking the Unthinkable, we work to highlight the positive when there is so much doom, gloom, and pessimism around. We want to open eyes and minds to how to achieve that positive. On climate, nature, and biodiversity, there is now a bitter war for the narrative. It's marked by disinformation, misinformation, and well-funded, slick deception designed to discredit the ever more pessimistic scientific realities. But 20 years on from his landmark Stern Review, Lord Nicholas Stern has just published his current assessment. Tackling climate change boldly is the growth story of the 21st century that will overcome all the negatives. That is, if people are given the encouragement and information to see the enormous opportunities that there are out there. Well, that's why we've invited Sarah Mukherjee to join our podcast. She is CEO of ISEP, that's the Institute of Sustainability and Environmental Professionals. ISEP has 21,000 members, professionals and organizations. Sarah has what I would call an admirably feisty, no-nonsense style, and most important, many positives to share and be proud of. Her members are not recoiling because of stark political pressure. Most are moving forward, and they're doing so pretty defiantly, as we're about to hear. So, Sarah, a very warm welcome. What are your members signalling to you in very clear numbers, especially about the core issue of curbing the cost of decarbonisation?
Well, thanks so much for having me, Nick. It's an absolute honour to be on the podcast. They are, and we know this because we did a survey fairly recently, on the whole, either keeping investment as it is or increasing investment into low carbon and sustainability. And I think this is one thing that I'm sure we can talk about a bit more, but we've put the wrong lens, I think, often onto the conversations we have around sustainability. And in the UK, that's for all sorts of reasons. It's because of class, it's because of demographics. But we are not talking about the first thing, which is you can save money. Quite obviously, I mean, if you think about it, if you use less power, if you use it more intelligently, if you use less stuff, and support the circular view of the economy, then you are going to use less resources and have more money on your bottom line. And this is very much the way that a lot of our members are seeing it. Also, because you cannot afford not to think about the next 10 or 15 years. I was on a platform recently with one of these, finance bros from New York. They're all wearing cashmere and sitting in their Lower East Side apartments, zooming in. And he said, and it was one of those moments you thought, hang on a second, did you actually say that? He said, actually, it's getting quite difficult to get finance and investment for some infrastructure projects long term because people simply don't know whether that bridge or building is going to be there in 10 years' time because you cannot predict the future anymore looking at historical meteorological records.
But let's look at the hard facts, Sarah, if we can. I mean, particularly about sustainability budgets. You're saying less than 2% of respondents say their sustainability budgets have actually decreased. In other words, yes. 98% are saying sustainability, bring it on.
Bring it on. And mainly, I mean, obviously, one of the reasons I've mentioned is the finance. Secondly, is that adaptation. I mean, we talk very little about adaptation. We've had the COP recently. It's currently going on as we speak. And there's a big emphasis on mitigation. But you have to adapt. Whatever you think the reason is for the changing climate, you have to adapt to it. And companies are looking out 5, 10, 15 years in advance. The reason cocoa and coffee are so expensive is in part because of climatic conditions. And so how are you going to sell chocolate if you can't get any cocoa anymore? These are the sort of questions that companies are asking themselves, and they have to invest in a sustainable future in order to mitigate those risks.
But you've done this data among your 21,000 members, and therefore you have clear evidence of what people are thinking. Why are they thinking positively, and why is the message coming out, which is one of, actually, there are a large number of people who are not positive about this?
Well, I mean, obviously, our members are their core purpose is to be sustainability professionals, and that's what they're doing within their organisations. But they're still there because organizations see that there is a solid business case in investing in a low carbon or sustainable future. They are still very bullish. Of course, you can't ignore that there are some quite difficult political headwinds. There are parts of the world where talking about climate change in a policy context is not feasible or possible anymore. We have had members who've been told they can't do particular pieces of work because of the word climate change or the word sustainability or diversity. But if you look around the world, there are so many parts of the world where this is simply not an issue. Organizations realize if they want to have, for example, AI in your country, that's very, very energy intensive. How are you going to find that extra energy? Well, you either import it for a lot of countries through fossil fuels or gas, or you use renewables. The IEA has recently, International Energy Agency, has recently said that they think now China has reached peak carbon a couple of years ago. And the reason, no, people aren't doing that for a charity or because they're part of some great kind of tree-hugging conspiracy. They're doing it because it makes business sense. And I think we, as a sustainability movement, we have to be far more honest and open about this, that this is about a business decision as much as doing the right thing.
So what are you seeing among the board members, among chief executives and so on, the kind of people you represent who are members of your organization? What are they saying to you about, actually, I want to be engaged in this. I want to drive this forward. I can see the economic advantages for my company.
The people who get it, get it. I mean, I do think sometimes when there are national, international shifts in policy and politics, and I'm sure you saw this as a journalist, as did I as a former journalist, some companies will use big political decisions as an excuse to do what they were going to do anyway. And they can say, oh, well, we can't take on more people because of this policy decision. But on the whole, we are seeing sustainability in a lot of territories, in places like the Middle East, in sub-Saharan Africa, in Singapore, is part of stated government intentions, and people are just moving those policies forward. Where they're not, where it's more difficult, they're calling it something different, like resilience, for example, or instead of diversity, they're talking about building good organizations. But the work is still going on.
What's your analysis then, Sarah, about why there is this negativity, which I said right at the beginning, the negativity, the doom and gloom? In other words, the perception that actually things don't work.
Well, I think we have to, as a sustainability sector, take some of the blame on this. And particularly if you're thinking particularly about the UK, it has been very much the people who are talking most about sustainability in some cases are the people for whom it sounds like a bit of a luxury pursuit. Now, this isn't the case all the time, but we've had a very kind of, it's felt like there's been a lot of people from old Etonians in fisherman sweaters, wagging their finger at you through the television.
You called it a middle class pick.
Yes, exactly. If only you lived in a yurt and didn't travel anywhere, and never flew, then you'd be a better person. Well, that's fine if you own your own land. That's fine if you're not renting. And that's fine if you don't have family members in other parts of the world. I think we disconnect so many people from non-Indigenous British communities by going on about flying. If you don't want to fly, that's fantastic. That's a personal choice. But I have a friend who is actually quite involved in the sustainability movement. He's the first person of his family to be born in this country. And he said, well, why am I saving the planet if I can never ever see my family? It puts people off in a way that is, I think, quite unhelpful. Yes, be conscious. Don't just fly for the sake of it. But if you need to, if it's important for you professionally or personally, then we have to think of how we support people to connect better.
Because you've talked about stopping talking to normal people. In other words, failing to get this message and the analysis over. The case, you said, has not been made that this is about me.
Yes, exactly. Because it feels like there's all sorts of burdens in this sustainability journey. You've got to buy more expensive stuff. You shouldn't be. I mean, I'll give you a couple of examples. So I've spoken to, when I was still at the BBC, to young mothers who are terrified not to give their kids anything other than organic food because they were really worried that anything else would harm them. So, and in some cases, not buying or buying fewer vegetables rather than buying enough for their family. Now, that is, and I'm sure there are people leading the organic movement who would agree, that's not the message you want to give to people. The message is eat healthily, eat vegetables, eat a good diet, and you'll support yourself. I've had recently, and we'll get on to welding. Welding is the big red flashing light in sustainability. There are very, very few welders, and we desperately need welders to literally build the new green economy. I was talking to one of the people who is involved in representing welders, and she said, well, do you know what? Very few welders want to join the green economy because they feel they're scabbing their mates in oil and gas. And we've got to the situation where people are ashamed to say they are working in real proper jobs and supporting green infrastructure. That has to be wrong.
We're really good at talking to ourselves, I heard you say once.
Yeah,
What do you mean by that?
absolutely. Well, we sit in lots of conferences and we pat each other on the back and we say we're doing really well. We're not going out and making the case to people who feel that they don't have rent till the end of the week, that they can't feed their kids, that they're having to choose between heating and eating. And if you talk to people privately in this space, they all say, yes, we have to get energy cheaper, because at the moment it feels like, and I know the government's doing quite a lot in this space, but it feels like we are saying to people, well, in 2030, it's all going to be much better. The reality is that we have expensive energy, in part because we are much more aligned to gas prices than other countries are. But that doesn't help you if you are terrified about putting the heating on. I mean, we all are. I'm sitting here with no heating on and a couple of jumpers on because I don't want to put it on. And while people feel that is somehow linked to green energy, and that is the message that people have been given, it's a very nuanced, actually, explanation. But if people feel that that's because we're paying in some way for green subsidies, then they are going to quite obviously feel negatively about a green transition. Where's the benefit? Where's the benefit for normal people?
I talked at the start about the narrative being increasingly dominated. And Ed Miliband at COP in Brazil has said, we're now involved in a fight, as he put it. What do you think needs to be done to make the narrative understandable to people? Because you've produced a blueprint for a green workforce transformation in which you say people can be convinced about the value of green jobs and green economy if they understand it.
Yes, absolutely. And part of that is, that's why we work with the number of companies that we do, because they're really keen to help their organizations understand, not just at the C-suite level, but everybody understand why this is so important. And I think workplace support and training is a really important tool. But for example, again, another example, I was talking recently to somebody who runs a further education training college, and they train gas fitters. And they do have spaces available for people doing heat pumps and renewable energy fitting. And bearing in mind that we're coming up to the date, which is a little bit of a movable feast, but the date is where we're supposed to be phasing down gas boilers. Most of the people they're training are gas fitters, because why would you not want to do that job? Because that's the job in your hand. We have got people who are being trained in renewable technologies and they don't have a job at the end of it. So making sure that if people join us, they actually have something to do at the end of it, but also that it's easy to understand. But there's a lot of people sitting in a lot of rooms, particularly in COP. I mean, I've been to more COPs than I care to remember. And, there's, as a journalist mainly, and it's just like acronym city. There's nobody who doesn't have a kind of encyclopedic knowledge of the process would have any idea about what's going on. And all people see is everybody flies in, they talk about it, and they all go home again. But what difference does that make to me? And making a clear case that this is how we're going to help you. We're going to have it, there will be jobs outside London that will be well paid, will be there for a generation. There will be industry outside cities, which will support local and economic growth. You can train and you can get a better job. It's better paid. And the green economy is developing times faster than the ordinary economy is. And we will need 200,000 jobs minimum, and proper jobs in order to build the infrastructure we need for a new future. And we're really bad at saying all of that. We're really good at telling people what they can't do.
Well, Sarah, how can that be achieved? And let's get back to the narrative, which comes down to politicians. It comes down to many of your members as well. And I quote here from that document, Blueprint for a Green Workforce Transformation. Over the next decade, we predict, that's you, we predict a green workforce emerging in which every employee understands how sustainability can create economic value. Right around the world, that is not yet something that's happening.
No, it isn't. And I think that there will be, climate change will be driving this a lot faster, of course, obviously. I mean, doctors are a really good example. I mean, draw a straight line between sustainability and doctors. Well, doctors will have to understand how to deal with patients who are overheating, who've got heat stroke, who maybe have diseases that we haven't seen in this country for some time because of the changing climate. One of our members of our team, their partner is a firefighter, and they've had to deal with, for example, electric vehicles hitting petrol vehicles or hitting petrol pumps in some cases. Well, that is a procedure, a protocol that you wouldn't need to have had even 5 or 10 years ago necessarily. If you think about anybody in procurement, they'll have to understand what climate change is going to do to raw materials. So every single part of an organization needs to understand what sustainability is and actually how you save money. Bring it back to money. You can save money by thinking through, as a part of your business processes, how you're going to be more sustainable.
Sarah, we've got a couple of minutes left. Give me your takeaway message then. You have data which is really very positive. That's why I'm talking to you. And I was very struck when I heard it. And then I looked at the data which was online. And I was very struck at the positiveness of the message that you're sending, particularly from the people who have to make those decisions. In other words, the chief executives and boards. So what's your message and the takeaway?
Well, I don't know when you did your journalist training, Nik, but when I did mine, I was told that you should be able to explain something to your mum or to your friends down the pub. And we're not doing that. So I would say those transferable skills, those soft skills we call them, which is a really bad way of putting it, communication, leadership, we should be really investing in those as a sustainability sector to tell a really clear and good story and make people understand why there is something in this for them as well, and not just the people, floating about drinking lattes and making policy.
Let's call it the Mukherjee mission. How can that be achieved, do you think, practically?
Well, I would say that we start in the workplace, that everybody gets, we don't even think about people having IT skills now because that's a given. You would expect that from a lot of people moving into the workplace, whatever IT skills there are. So I think, if it was up to me, we would be treating sustainability in the same way as we treat health and safety. This is a critical business potential area for failure. And there will be costs associated to it. So very much like health and safety, why are we not talking about sustainability in the same way? And assuming that we will have training programs for everybody in work, and also supporting people transitioning out of full-time education and transitioning out of the workforce as well, and maybe finding different skills to help people continue to be valuable members of society as they move out of the workforce as well.
But finally, Sarah, what kind of key will unlock the door here? What is needed? Is there one particular thing which you think will achieve something really significant to get buy-in from the 70 or 80% of people who are really worried about climate but don't know what to do and are very suspicious?
Well, I think it is a difficult one. I mean, I have to say, much relentlessly positive as I am, because we know as journalists, it's like shooting fish in a barrel, isn't it? You find something that people are really invested in. Recycling is a really good example. And then it's very easy to find areas where there isn't best practice and where it is all beginning to fall apart. And then people start feeling as though it's, well, what's the point of doing that? Having said that, if you go and talk to people once they've had sustainability training, or when their company has got involved in this, the lights go, quite literally, the lights go on. They understand what difference it makes to be to live. Certainly not have it to be extreme about it, but to do those little changes. Often, I think we let the perfect be the enemy of the good. If you switch the lights off when you leave the office in the evening, and you switch the lights off when you're not using those lights, you're not only saving carbon, you're saving money as well. And just those small incremental differences, I think, if spread over a population, make a massive difference in terms of the load that we need for energy, or the resources that we need in the economy, and the money in people's pockets as well.
So a clear, positive message. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us. You can reference every detail that Sarah has given us. That's because a transcript of the podcast is posted in parallel on our website, along with contact details for us and Sarah at the Institute of Sustainability and Environmental Professionals. Do please join us when we have our next conversation about Thinking the Unthinkable. Be positive as well. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you'll find our podcast very much in the same vein of frankness as we've just heard from Sarah. So from me, Nik Gowing, until the next time, keep thinking unthinkables. More than ever, it's both possible and necessary. From Sarah and from me, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.